This video is kindly sponsored by Magic Spoon. Welcome back to the Screened Film Club. In today's video, we continue our retrospective look at horror throughout the decades. If you missed our first videos, you can click here to be up to date. As with the 60s, we will be splitting the video in two parts because that's just the life of a part-time YouTuber. Today's video will be about the subgenre that really took off in the 70s. I feel like that's when the seeds that were planted in the past started blooming, where directors really started to let loose. It's not that there wasn't any creativity before, change was already happening by the end of the 60s. With the abolition of the self-imposed moral code, the new rating system, the studio's decreased power and influence in regard to the content of their films, evolving technologies that made filming outside of sets easier, there was a renewed sense of freedom for American filmmakers. Along with a changing film-going demographic, mounting influence from French and Italian cinema, and a rejuvenation behind the camera, the 70s delivered films that felt very different from what the old golden age of Hollywood would have produced. A lot of movies had a postmodern feel to them, subverting known conventions about race, gender, religion, or class, showcasing a disillusionment or distrust of institutions traditionally seen as trustworthy, a decreased belief in the heroes and myths that were once popular, giving us movie endings where not everything is tied up with a nice little bow, where things remain bleak and unresolved, where the monster isn't always defeated in the end. Before we continue, let's segue into today's sponsor, Magic Spoon. So I've been trying to be more mindful of what I eat and reduce the amount of sugar I take in, and I've been liking Magic Spoon because they offer a right consensus between the cereal I would have enjoyed as a child, but with the health benefits I'm looking for as an adult. They have all kinds of flavors you can try out, like fruity, cookies and cream, frosted. But my go-to recently has been the dark and chocolatey cocoa. It's a great plus for people with different dietary needs. Magic Spoon has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving. Only 140 calories per serving. They're also keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and low-carb. So check out Magic Spoon for yourself. Click the link below to grab a variety pack and try it today. And be sure to use the promo code SCREENED at checkout to get $5 off any order, or go to magicspoon.com/screened. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. So click the link below and use the code SCREENED for $5 off, or go to magicspoon.com/screened to save $5 today. And now back to the show. Whenever I think of horror in the 1970s, there's always a subgenre that first comes to mind, the slasher. A horror movie about a killer on the loose that murders people with razor-sharp objects. I remember having an aversion to the subgenre as a kid because I didn't like to see people bleeding, especially from knife wounds. It wasn't so much about the blood, but more about the feeling of being cut. If a paper cut could be painful, then how much worse would a stab wound be? An object forcefully penetrating your flesh, lacerating the different layers of skin, muscle, severing nerves and blood vessels. It evokes a visceral reaction from the viewer. Another reason I was wary of slashers was because of the villains. For the most part, they were just people, not a vampire nor a werewolf nor an alien. Human monsters are oftentimes more disconcerting than those of supernatural origin because they remind us that they can exist in real life and be hiding in plain sight, where the monster is a mere mortal, preying on the innocent. Like the one lurking in the dark corners of the first movie on our list.
Hello? Hello? Who is this?
Black Christmas presents us a human monster that remains hidden throughout the movie, killing people inside a sorority house. The only ones that get to see the killer are its victims, right before dying. We as an audience only see POV shots, flashes of him, and hear his demented ravings.
Could that be one person?
The minimalistic approach, along with the fact that we learn so very little about the killer, puts us at the same disadvantage as the young women who don't know there's someone dangerous in the attic. We know something is going to happen, but we have no idea how or when, or even the manner in which the murderer will react. If when you watch Black Christmas, you say to yourself, wait a minute, I've seen this before. I knew the boyfriend was a red herring. Maybe it's because Black Christmas was the first movie to introduce certain ideas and pave the way in a few areas. It was the first holiday-themed slasher, the first phone call killer movie, and it was the first usage of the call is coming from inside the house trope. Its unresolved ending is one that became common with the types of movies coming out in the 70s. Its contributions to the genre are sometimes overshadowed by a movie that came out a few years later. John Carpenter's Halloween.
Come on now.
A murderer escapes a mental hospital and comes back to his hometown and goes on a killing spree 15 years after he killed his sister, on Halloween. If you look at some of the movie's elements, you realize that they're not breaking new ground. A killer whose face we don't really see, lurking in the shadows inside of a house. A piano theme eerily similar to another prominent 70s horror movie. But what Halloween does so well is use these known elements to crank up the dread and anticipation. You keep wondering, who is under that mask? Does he look as demented as his actions lead us to believe? Is he disfigured? And you even ask yourself if he's human after all. You know Michael Myers is flesh and blood. You even saw him as a child. But the way he seems to appear and disappear out of thin air, the way he seems unaffected by injuries and seems to have superhuman strength, it makes him the perfect boogeyman for children to be afraid of. This is where this movie goes beyond your garden variety slasher, and becomes one that foreshadows a whole slew of masked and unmasked blade-wielding big bads. Halloween introduces us to a slasher villain that's an indestructible evil force. Although it's technically not part of the slasher subgenre, there is a type of movie that is both adjacent to it and was an influence on it from overseas, giallo. Without going too much into detail, the term means yellow in Italian. It's named that way because of a series of detective novels with yellow covers released as of 1929. The term caught on and became associated with the genre and is now another word that means crime novel. For the most part, its stories were murder mysteries that didn't stray into the supernatural, which is not what Suspiria did. Suspiria is the story of Susie Banyan, a new dancer that arrives at a prestigious ballet academy just as one of the school's girls has been murdered. Strange events happen around Susie as she tries to dig deeper into the murder and into the academy's dark history. The movie's opening sequence is the first indicator that you're in for an unconventional ride. Most horror films start with a sense of normality, and then plunge you into the horror world at the end of the first act. But in Suspiria, everything is intensely sinister from the very start. Argento creates the impression that the very country we've landed in is inherently evil. Suspiria is a film that can be a bit trippy. Its bright colors stand in contrast with the darker tones of Halloween and Black Christmas. The soundtrack and the cinematography give the movie a unique style and feel that can at times feel excessive, disorienting, and even dreamlike, which reflects Susie's state of mind. Yes, the acting wasn't memorable in a positive way, and the effects are very dated. But the atmosphere created by the music, the camera work, and the story make you feel like you're watching a dark and twisted fairy tale. In all three instances, although the payoff might be gruesome or disturbing, it wouldn't be as impactful if not for the setup, the tense ambiance, the dreadful atmosphere, the deadly game of cat and mouse. Even though these movies contain blood, they show us that blood by itself isn't the scary part, it's the whole anticipation and build-up. We hope you enjoyed our short dive into the 70s slashers. Please stay tuned for part 2, where we will look at certain 70s horror movies that go beyond the human monster. Until next time.